Hello, namaste, and thank you for your continued interest in the short talks I'm doing about the overlap between Metatron and Shiva, Metatron Kabbalah, Shiva Hinduism, as I have experienced it and am still experiencing it during studies. In the first two videos about this topic, I gave a historical and textual background to Metatron. In the next, the third part, I added a few foundational Kabbalistic topics, such as the Tree of Life, the 10 Sefirot, and the extra, well, it's not extra, but the hidden Sfira Da'at knowledge. The Sfira Da'at, it's not the 11th, as it is stated clearly in Sefer Yetzirah, there is no 11th. It's more that the hidden Sfira Da'at teaches more about the inner dynamics of the tree of Sefirot, in particularly the second and the third, in between which Da'at is placed, Chokhmah and Bina, which are wisdom and understanding. So it's all about knowledge and about knowing and about interacting with reality and the place of the mind in all of that. That's what the Sfira Da'at is all about. So Da'at, knowledge in between wisdom and understanding. Yeah, so in the first two talks, the connection that I'm trying to show between Shiva and Metatron was mostly through the concept of mystical death. And in the last one, the third video, I addressed the same connection through the aspect of equanimity and yoga, Jnana Yoga in particular, as it is represented by Metatron, and then mostly Metatron being placed in between the mother and the father, Chokmah and Bina, as it is called in the book of Splendor, the Zohar. So in this talk, I'd like to return to the first video, where it was mostly about just the plain text. So I want to return to the textual background and share a little bit about how it is when you study Kabbalah. So Kabbalah, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as the first mainstreams of Kabbalah, practical Kabbalah, were concerned, it's not about learning theory and following theory and becoming all dogmatic about it, because that's just plain boring. So it's about the interaction with the text, and to Kabbalists, the source texts are living texts. So it's about recognizing certain things that speak to you, that resonate with you, and following them throughout the text. So just like a novice to Hindu temples can recognize a specific connection with a specific deity or a specific shape of the temple, and subsequently will make pilgrimages to other temples that express the same, and hence can learn more about this. Similarly, the Kabbalist in the textual context will do the same. A word will speak out to him or her. They can then first look at the word and the numbers that the word implies, and that the numbers that the word has, of course, as well, the colors, the shapes, all of that. And once this has become very familiar, then often from one corner something else will call out to the Kabbalist, like another temple, and one can make that pilgrimage to that other word or that other concept, and hence learn more. So in this case, I'd like to go first back to the Genesis 5:24, which was the proof text for the Kabbalists that Enoch went through a process of mystical death. So Genesis 5:24 reads, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." So let me see. So apart from of course, the fascinating meaning of the verse itself, there are two other particularly interesting words in Genesis 5:24. So the one is eineno, and that's the word that expresses how Enoch was no longer and was taken by God. So eineno, he was no longer, of course, is clearly an echo of mystical death, and as such is Shaivite in essence, and as such instantly has my interest when I encounter something like this. So this being no longer in later Kabbalah, 18th century Hasidim, the pietists I'm mostly thinking of. I'm saying 18th century because there's also a stream of Hasidim in the 13th century in Germany. But it was mostly the pietists of the 18th century, headed by the Baal Shem Tov, the master of the good name, the Besht, who really got into the same concept of being no longer. So they use the eineno, but in a different way. They use the word for ani, which is the word for I, ani, and the negational word ein, which is also part of the word eineno. So as such, ein ani expresses I am not. And the interesting thing here is that these words, Ein and Ani, have the same letters, which is Kabbalistically important because it means they express the same essence. So the I, expressed by these three letters, becomes just purely negation when the letters have a different sequence in the word. So the place where a letter is in a word is important as well, not just the numbers, not just the first letter of a word and the last letter, etc., etc. Every single thing in the text is important. And to the Hasidim, this Ein Ani expressed how, in their case, through not so much through studying the text, more through dance, it was a completely different mystical stream, but how they, through their mystical interactions, became as if not, and that was their aim, because when they are not, God can enter, and there would be the mystical unico, as it was described, the total reunification with the divine. So that's the one word that is important in this verse, Genesis 5:24, clearly dealing with mystical death. The other word that is instrumental is the one that describes Enoch's walking to and fro before God took him. Now, this particular verbal form is interesting because it does not occur many times in the Torah and Tanakh. But where it does occur, it has very strong implications of God's direct interaction with this our world, and hence again it's all about mysticism. So this word lehithalech, to walk to and fro, first appearance in the Torah is in Genesis 3:8, where it's used to describe the walking around of God's voice in the Garden of Eden. So clearly the verb here has a strong divine content as well. The next mention of the said verb is then in the context of Enoch's life and mystical death. After this, the verb reappears in Genesis 6:9, describing Noah's life, another instance of a great interference, if you will, of God in the human world. And then the fourth context in which the verb litalech appears is in connection with Abraham, and that's for us the most interesting connection. So it first appears in Genesis 13:17. After that, it appears in Genesis 17:1, and that's the one I would like to focus on. So the first verse we were talking about was Genesis 5:24. Enoch walked with God, lehithalech, and he was not, eineno, and God took him, mystical death. So the taking of God, interestingly, happened when Enoch was 365 years old. Of course, numbers are important in Kabbalah, and when something like this, a word number occurs, then yeah, people pay attention. It's a bit too much to go into this now, but 365 for one thing, so the age of Enoch when he was going through his experience of Satori or Nirvana or however you want to call it. This age is also the number of negative commandments in Judaism. So all the commandments that state, thou shalt not. This is interesting because it's negation. And usually in a mystical context, the cleaning of oneself, the becoming not, is through negation. So that's an interesting overlap of the 365. Another one is that the number 365 can spell the word he will change, which in this context is then, of course, the mystical revolution, the personal change, the spiritual change. And most importantly, 365 matches two elements that are strongly connected to Metatron, and that's, of course, interesting for us in this next step with the verb lehithalech. So Metatron, Enoch became the angel Metatron. Metatron, like I said in the previous video, is usually placed in the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation. Now, each of the four Kabbalistic worlds have different spellings of the tetragrammaton. So we already talked about the tetragrammaton. The most important four-lettered name, Yud He Vav He, spelled like that. It has the number or the numerical value 26. But in the different worlds, the tetragram expresses itself differently. Probably more correctly in a Kabbalistic sense, the tetragrammaton expresses itself differently, and as a result of that, there are different worlds. So in the world of Yetzirah, the tetragrammaton is written with extra letters and then amounts to 45. Now, one of the main cognomen of Metatron, apart from the one we already encountered, which is the Prince of the Countenance, the other most important name is the Youngster. mostly because he was one of the latest angels to be added to the Jewish angelology. There are other reasons, which are, again, they lay beyond our scope a little. The youngster, Na'ar in Hebrew, has the numerical value of 320. So Na'ar, the youngster placed in his world, which is the world of Yetzirah, has the numerical value 45 of the Tetragrammaton. 45, 320 together, 365. So there are other pathways here that one could follow. Studying Kabbalah, if there's a certain number that one is intrigued by or just resonates strongly, then that's an example of how to continue the study. For us, there's more to say still about the overlap between Genesis 5:24, where Lehit Halech appears, and Genesis 17:1, where Lehit Halech appears as well. So even though for me the overlap was Lehit Halech, I knew that this verb appeared in these different verses. When looking at this verse, it was clearly a confirmation of lots of other things. So that's what pulls people to Kabbalah, and it's the beauty of Kabbalah. You feel something, you follow one word, in this case, Lehit Halech, you end up with another verse that resonates somehow, and then when you study that verse, you see usually that all the elements, or lots of different elements, refer back to what you started with. So it really becomes a conversation and an interaction, and this can go very deep, and before you know it, you're writing very, very long books, like what I'm doing. So Genesis 17:1 contains Lehit Halech, but the full verse reads, "And when Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am the Almighty God, and walk before me and be perfect." So apart from Lehit Halech, the first thing that stands out as another number is the 99. And we were already talking about the 9 as the totem of Shiva, and now we found in the previous videos also the totem of Metatron through the name Shaddai, which is connected to the 9 Sephira Yesod. So the occurrence here of 99 is important and beautiful. Now, apart from that, the divine name used in this verse is the name translated as Almighty God, is Shaddai. Like I said, we already encountered this, again a confirmation. Shaddai is linked to the 9 and to Metatron. Then follows walk before me, which we already found an expression of a very intimate connection between the divine and our present world. And then it ends with and be perfect. Now the word perfect in Hebrew is tam, but written in the opposite direction. It means, it writes, or it spells mavet. Mavet means death. So here we have God saying, walk before me, have a mystical encounter with me, and mystically die. Which of course is straight back to Genesis 5:24, where Enoch mystically died and became Metatron. So these overlaps are quite clear. And just as an example of how a textual overlap leads to overlap in wider meanings, and often even pertaining to a specific metaphysical philosophy. So I think now I'd like to say a little bit more about permutation systems, because in this context, especially now, just having mentioned Genesis 17:1, where Abram has 99, the 2 9s there to a Kabbalist are a very strong reference to permutation systems. So I think because that's such a big topic, I'll address that next time. And I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again soon.